Hey everyone, it's Hannah from My Planet, My Voice, and this is Climate 101, your three-part guide to understanding the basics of climate change and blah, blah, blah. In part 2, we learned about the impacts that climate change can have on people and the planet, and oh boy, were there a lot of them. From sea level rise to extreme weather to effects on human health, the list just goes on and on. I don't know about you guys, but I'm honestly feeling super overwhelmed by all this. It's like the other Hannah from part 2 said. Man, this is way more serious than I thought. And honestly a little scary. I mean, how are we even supposed to solve a problem that's this big? Yeah, I'm not really sure either. Sometimes it's hard to know where to begin. But I do remember talking about this with our guests from previous episodes of Climate 101, and I asked some new folks about it too. So let's check it out together and maybe we'll find some inspiration for what we can do about climate change. Despite having a variety of backgrounds and specialties, everyone we spoke with pretty much came to a common consensus. Individual behavior change is a great start, but collective action and systems change are even more crucial.
I really am passionate about how does individual action turn into systemic change.
I think one of the things that's a problem is the degree to which we've made climate action about just individuals' small consumer-based choices.
Major radical changes in our global economy need to occur.
Our decision makers pay attention to those who show up. You can't win if you're not in the game. So if you can, try and show up.
How we choose to interrupt or divest from the systems that are harming our Earth and us as people are some of the most powerful things we can do.
The way that we behave as individuals and how that impacts the larger community and community change, we'll see a lot of systems change.
But effective climate action can look different for everyone, and all of our guests had their own unique perspectives to share.
There's a lot of individual actions folks can do around growing their own food, anything around consuming less, repairing what you already have, making things instead of buying things, sharing things with friends, building community around that. But I always think everything's a lot more fun together. So I start with, let's get some friends together and start talking about it and think about what can we do. It helps encourage people to have those behavior changes too, because culture change is really created by each of us in our daily conversations, how we show up, how we talk, how we dress, how we do our everyday lives. That's why every conversation is so important, because conversations are the seeds for behavior change, much more so than data. As much as we dump data on people about climate change, data doesn't change behavior. What changes behavior is who's doing what around you. It's hard to make these changes at the scale and pace that is necessary. So people either feel overwhelmed at the beginning, so they don't get started. They don't know where to get started, so they don't get started. That action can't get to where it needs to go without our government seriously stepping in and putting a lot of investments into the systems and the infrastructure to change from a fossil fuel-based economy to a clean energy economy.
Only 100 corporations are responsible for 70% of global emissions, right? 100 corporations, most of them fossil fuel corporations, right? So that is telling us something. That is telling us that we need to stop relying on fossil fuels. People are extremely busy just trying to survive every day. And I think that the most important thing about talking about climate change is making people realize that, it is an issue that is already affecting them first, and it's an issue that is going to continue to affect them. And also that by addressing climate change, they can also address the other issues that are complicating their lives a lot more. Because if you begin the conversation with that, we all want to be happy, right? We all want to have a healthier planet. We all want clean air and water. We all want job security. We want stability. So all of those things are related. And by addressing climate change, we can achieve so much of that. We have the technological capacity. We have the like the talent, we have the people, we just don't have the political will to make that happen, because that goes against, right, the benefit of the corporations that have been, like making crazy amounts of profit and wealth of the selling of fossil fuels, and an entire global economy based on fossil fuels is going to make some people very rich and powerful. So we need to make those decisions for the greater of humanity, right? We need to move away from that, like eternal economic growth type of dogma, and move more into kind of the sustainable economy, like circular economy, where instead of growth, we focus on making our economy stable, but not by taking more than what we need from our planet, right? And by taking care of our planet at the same time.
We've come to associate tackling climate change with like switching out the light bulbs in your house, right? Or carrying around your reusable water bottle, or buying a metal straw instead of using a plastic straw. And while that's all great, right? Like, don't stop bringing your reusable grocery bags to the grocery store. It's better than using plastic or paper. We've allowed people to kind of like pat themselves on the back and feel like we're good, right? Like, we're tackling this problem. And I think that massively understates the amount of change we need to have happen, right? And the amount that we need to push the economy into a different direction to tackle this challenge in a way that doesn't send us at 3 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees Celsius or more of warming. If the whole economy is going to change as much as it needs to, or at least the energy that powers that economy is going to change as much as it needs to, we need policy change, we need structural change. And so getting that means enough people using their voice and pushing for that kind of policy change and that kind of action. And so that to me is the number one thing people can do. And whether that looks like for you getting out and being part of that movement, right? Being part of that activism, whether it looks like just talking with people around you a lot more about climate change to bring more awareness to the issue. If you want to be an educator, teaching about it. If you want to go into media, right? Making specials like this around it. And so doing that activist work, I think, is the most important thing people can do, pushing on the policy, on the change.
And speaking of policy, this is Kevin Fang, an assistant professor and director of the Center for Sustainable Communities at Sonoma State University. We discussed how young folks can help influence the big systemic and policy changes we need to effectively address climate change.
So I know a lot of times people could feel like you might be a little bit powerless to fight, an issue as large as climate change. But I think there are definitely things you can do as an individual. Local governments make a lot of their decisions based off of sort of how much input that they get. So who shows up at a city council meeting, and what do they talk about, and what angles and what positions do the people who show up to meetings support? And so say you're someone who's interested in sort of and cares about environmental issues and cares about climate change, are the people who are showing up to the meetings and making their voices heard, are they coming up with the same positions that you support or not? Sort of put pressure on folks that are older and the ones that are making decisions and driving policy decisions to pay attention to your voices. And part of that is, again, just showing up. So there have been studies that looked at who participates in public meetings, and they tend to be older, wealthier, homeowner type people, and so they're the ones playing the game. And so I know young folks might be working multiple jobs, going to school. So if you can, try and show up. It can't be as simple as, again, showing up to meetings and making that your perspective is one that is heard by decision makers physically. Whether it's for state legislators or national legislators, they typically have phone lines and offices. And it can be as simple as saying, it's like, hey, I'm a constituent of whatever representative it is, and I support or oppose a certain bill.
So, showing up to voice your concerns is really important when climate policies are on the table. And to dive a little deeper into what meaningful community input looks like, I spoke with Janina Turner, Environmental Justice Co-Director for Oakland-based organization Hope Collaborative.
Environmental justice to me means that people in communities have a say in what environmental policies are passed in their community. They have access to clean air, clean water, healthy food. So I think when it comes to making environmental policies, you hear the term like seat at the table a lot, but it's more than just having a seat at the table for particular people. It's people in those communities should be making the decisions. Sometimes people are brought in just to like be a check mark saying, yeah, we talked to the community, but the community really should be the ones driving those changes. And I think with marginalized groups, it's a matter of support and not trying to like co-opt whatever movement they have. Co-opting is really just like coming into a movement and just declaring, hey, I'm here to help and I'm gonna take over and this is what's gonna happen. Supporting is like adequately coming in and being like, hey, I'm here to help in whatever way you need. This is your voice, this is your community, but I'm here to donate time, here to donate money, here to donate resources to help you in your movement. It's all about movement building and bringing communities and people together to really address those issues, whether that be advocacy, whether it be making their own plans and policies and taking those to their representatives to get them passed. I think it's all about getting people together, understanding the issue, finding the solutions that work for them and their communities and making them happen. Climate change, it's a subject that a lot of people can really dwell on and not want to talk about because it's really scary. But the more we talk about it, the more we can figure out what the problems are, what the solutions are, especially on the local level. If we cease to talk about it, it doesn't mean the issue itself goes away. It just means that polluters are going to keep polluting, things aren't going to change. The more we talk about it, the more we have the conversation, the more we can get people involved, the more we can build those movements, the more we can make that change. And solution sounds like a big word, like we're gonna solve the climate crisis just by talking about it, but it's a good first step to like really figuring out what's happening and how we can address it.
We are a political organization here at YUCA that is very adamant about supporting people, decision makers who are going to make decisions in the interest of our people and our earth. And we see those as inseparable from each other. It's going to take collective action from the people who experience the brunt of, climate change the most, and I think the longest, in the form of voting, in the form of like where we choose to spend our dollars. All of those small actions definitely take us in the right direction as smaller community units, and also help us build the resilience on top of the already existing resilience that we have, because this is unfortunately one of those fights that I think is gonna take much more than a few years. Join an organization, join some community group, or join a group of folks that are like-minded and have similar interests. There are so many nonprofits, there are so many amazing groups of other young people doing similar work who didn't start off as experts, who didn't, you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to have all the technical jargon down or all of the scientific kind of knowledge about how climate change happened and what it's going to take to solve all of it. You just have to have, that fire inside of you and that passion and that love for the earth, for justice, for seeing climate justice take place in our communities. And there are so many strengths that you bring as an individual at whatever stage you are in your life to the movement, and you are so, so needed.
Ophelia's right. There's a place in this movement for everyone, and there's so much we can all do to contribute. And if you're still in need of inspiration, here are some words of encouragement our guests want to leave you with.
Sometimes it can feel overwhelming of like, what can I do about climate change? But it gives me purpose, and it gives me a sense of connection and belonging to my community to at least try. And every little action really does make a difference. I spent all last night dehydrating pears, and it's not going to have the biggest greenhouse gas footprint to not be buying pears from the supermarket, but it also brought me joy and connection to the seasonality, that it's pear season, and that I'm creating my own food source, and in the winter I'll be able to eat it. And so sometimes there's actions that have a big climate footprint benefit, and sometimes there's actions that just help build our sense of connection to the planet and to its rhythms and its cycles. And that too is an important part of addressing climate change, is the culture change.
I think people need to understand like they do have power, and that everything they do, whether it be voting, whether it be volunteering, whatever their activism looks like, is the start of something. And that really impacts how other people see themselves and how they can get involved. I know for me, like if I weren't super involved, there's a lot of people in my life who wouldn't be as well versed in the climate crisis and activism and community organizations and other things they can do. So I think what we do really impacts the people around us, which then impacts the culture and the system. So I think I really want people to understand like they have power.
It doesn't make sense to give up, both because the solutions are there and because everything we can do to prevent this much more warming and then this much more warming is going to matter, not just for ourselves, but for, again, people who are much more vulnerable than us all around the globe. And so, you know, I get people feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and scared because you look at the data and it is pretty scary. And yet, there are things we can do to prevent those most dramatic outcomes.
The world that we want to live in already exists in microcosms, in small places, like here at YUCA, like in your local community garden, like in your local housing co-op. The work that you probably want to do or that you feel like is super important that needs to be done is probably happening somewhere in a small corner, and you have all of the power that you need to amplify it, to participate in it, to lift it up, and to continue advancing it forward. And that's where I think we all are going to find the strength and resilience to keep advancing our communities and our world forward to where we want to be.
Yeah, I'm feeling inspired and empowered. Okay, we've established that the climate crisis is a huge problem, but there's actually plenty that we can do to help combat it. In fact, I'm feeling a lot better about this now that I know that there are solutions out there and ways that I can take action. Let's do a quick review of the ways that we can help. Show up when climate change decisions are being made in your community. It can be as simple as saying you support or oppose a bill or measure. Join an organization. There's so much work being done already, and there definitely is a place in this movement where you belong. Form your own climate movement. Don't see the changes you think are needed in your community? Get together with others and create your own climate change collective. Change some of your own behaviors. Even better, do it with friends, because you don't have to do this work alone. Of course, this doesn't mean that everything is sunshine and rainbows now. To mitigate the worst climate impacts, the systems we live in need to drastically change, and it needs to happen fast, like right now. But one of the most critical things that we can do is keep talking about climate change. That's why we created My Planet, My Voice, to uplift voices and share stories around climate change from people like you, yes, you, who care about our planet, our lives, and our futures. Thanks so much for watching Climate 101. Be sure to subscribe to our channel to see more content just like this, and stay tuned to see what we do next. Until then, you know how it goes. Stay loud, be heard, and let's save this planet together.